Once more, a very good morning to all. Today, we have Professor Sanjoy Mukhopadhyay as our distinguished speaker. And of course, he doesn't require any introduction. We can, from the organizer's point of view, we can say that we have perhaps kept one of the best right for the end, if not the best. Professor Mukhopadhyay will be talking on Girl Before a Mirror, Politics of Representation. Over to you, sir. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes. I think he has come. Yes. Yes, sir, you can begin.
Thank you. I'm here. Sorry. I brought a cup of tea.
Yes, sir, we are waiting early for your presentation.
Thank you very much. I wish a very good morning to the participants, our colleagues in different colleges and universities who have taken the trouble of participating in the workshop. And I told the organizers again and again that I am not particularly a man of the season, but then they requested and I considered it as an honor to have a chance to speak before you on certain issues which bothers everyone. Now we will be talking about cinema. As far as I know, it's practically the concluding day of the session. The 7 days long workshop is going to be concluded today, and it's time for cinema. That's the most interesting thing, that people usually are overwhelmed by cinema, and they usually tend to think that cinema is, after all, an entertainment, an easier path towards heaven. Now, as far as I am concerned, perhaps I thought my title was The Girl Before a Mirror, Politics of Representation. A woman, definitely. So, when I said Girl Before a Mirror, I referred to a very famous Pablo Picasso painting where we see a girl looking at the mirror. That what we actually see is not a simple case of a girl watching the image. It's actually a girl watching that she is being watched by herself in the mirror, and ultimately the image gets more prominence than herself. It's a combination of the actual woman and the represented woman, and we have been given to take a kind of voyeuristic look into the image by courtesy Picasso. It's a kind of scopophilia, which Freud would say to describe such a situation. Now, when we talk about women in cinema, women and cinema, we think that the reality is represented, and who are advanced among us, they usually are hell-bent upon adding a simple adjective, a patriarchal notion of looking. Yes, definitely it's patriarchy, which is looking the image, particularly the female image. It's a fateful coincidence that Jean-Luc Godard chose to die on 13th. If I had the slightest knowledge that he would take recourse to a kind of assisted suicide, I definitely requested to change the name of the title after his famous film, 2 or 3 Things That I Know About Her. It is a film he made in 1966, long back, and which has become a part of feminist studies everywhere on earth, and is definitely a significant looking at her from the cinematic point of view. How do we consider women in a patriarchal society, in a society dominated by us? Sometimes we quote Tagore, Naho Mata, Naho Konna, Naho Bodhu Sundari Ruposhi, He Nandana Vashini Udboshi. And I am sure some of you miss the nuance of Bangla language, so I'll have to make a weak translation. Neither a mother, nor a wife, nor a daughter, nor a profound goose, Sundari Ruposhi, in French. Oh, lady, you live in paradise. Rabindranath was referring to Udbashi, the divine dancer. And then we have another notion, which we often quote. Usually the prime ministers and the chief ministers are very fond of the quotation. Nari Shede Mohendrer Dan, Ishite Dhoritri Tale Purushere Otpite Samma. If I make a weak translation again, it becomes, woman, oh woman, you are a gift from Lord Shiva. You have descended to the earth in order to honor the male being. So you have a passive existence, you have a mysterious existence, and this mystery is palpable everywhere. I just read out something from a moment which you may like. It's a very important moment. Richard Burton first meeting the young Elizabeth Taylor, and a famous love drama would begin. You just note the rhetoric of Richard Burton. Let me read out. It's from my diary. She was, Burton saying, so extraordinarily beautiful. She was feminine, fire, destruction, and plague. The only true begetter. Her breasts were apocalyptic. They would topple empires before they withered. Her body was a miracle of construction. She was unique, unquestionably gorgeous. She was lavish. She was dark, unyielding, largesse. She was, in short, too bloody much. Those huge violet blue eyes had an odd glint. Eons passed, civilizations came and went, while these cosmic headlights examined my flawed personality. Every pockmark on my face became a crater of the moon. This is Richard Brabourne describing his first sight of 19-year-old Elizabeth Taylor. No doubt about that Elizabeth Taylor attracted everywhere, particularly the heterosexual male. But look at the rhetoric of Richard Brabourne. It's like a tribute, almost Homeric in nature. And Richard is deliberately trying to make Elizabeth a kind of goddess rather than an actor and a young girl. This is the politics, that a woman is a woman, une femme c'est une femme in the language of Godard, but she is an aggregate of everything. She contains some more. Une femme c'est une femme, a woman is a woman, the film made by Godard in 1963. And as people belonging to the world of film studies, you can well appreciate that we are still remembering Godard, and we are actually overshadowed by him. The age is dominated by him. He made this film in 1963. A woman is a woman. Une femme, c'est une femme. But une femme, ce n'est pas une femme. You have seen Richard Brabourne paying tribute to the 19-year-old Elizabeth Taylor. And you know, their love affair would make something called romantic meeting afterwards, particularly during the making of Cleopatra in the mid-1960s. Anyway, let us come back to our own point. Then, what is a woman? Qu'est-ce que c'est la femme? Definitely she is a biological being, gendered. But how do you describe her in cinema terms? I'm not going into literature. How do you describe her? Always you is there any problem? Do you hear me? Okay. If we look at the cinematic situation, we would see that a woman always remains under surveillance. She is constructed, that you know. You know everything practically. She is second sex, a la Simone de Beauvoir. She is dominated by the patriarchy, you know. And you know also know that she is constructed. How she is constructed in cinema, that is a mystery with us, because cinema basically is a construction both of the male and of the female. That at the moment we are more concerned with the construction of the female. Because we often like to believe that we have understood the politics behind this construction, but alas, cinema is something which communicates before it is understood, because it is ocular-centric. It shows you image and it buys you before you can get into the actualities of the affair. That's the whole problem. If you go to the Western cinemas, particularly Hollywood cinema, you would see the formation of the star image. And look at the scholars like Richard Dyer and others. They have elaborately described how the star image is formed and how they become an actor with a biography. If not that every actor, be it Sophia Loren, be it Marilyn Monroe, be it Elizabeth Taylor, they become star. They may be good actor, but it is an elaborate system that makes someone star. Why Shuchitra Sen became a star? Why the Rahman became a star, and why Madhuri Dixit became a star? That is a hidden agenda with the makers, and we will try to explain in our own terms in our own terms, because I don't like to read out from the well-known essays of the feminist authors like Claire Johnston, Mary Antoine, Desire to Desire, like Laura Mulvey, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. They have extensively discussed these things, but usually in association with the Western cinemas, particularly Hollywood cinema. And we here in India are more concerned with the cinemas that we confront, that we encounter in Bengal and elsewhere in Maharashtra and sometime in Tamil Nadu. In Kolkata, we are more accustomed towards Hindi cinema, so-called Bollywood cinema, Bangla cinema, and Tamil cinema. Not that we are privileged to view Telugu, Kannada cinema that much in our own town. Obviously, everybody in this session is not a resident of Kolkata, but definitely majority of them. So, when you start with cinematic representation, it's always better to go to, say, Satyajit. Not because of the fact that we have just crossed the centenary moment, but you can look how he fought against the usual representational mode of women in cinema. Let us consider his peak period in the 1960s and the cinema, which he considered his best so far as making is concerned. We are considering that film. Let us begin with Charulata, the lonely lady, in English topic. What is Charulata? And you would understand that he fought against the conventional mode and established Charulata as the principal protagonist in the narrative, thereby challenging the whole notion of 19th century history formation. Let me briefly explain. What is that? Because we mean majority of our historians believe that something magical happened in this planet, in this part of the planet during 19th century. Roughly, you can call it an era which began with Ram Mohan Rai and unfortunately ended with Satyajit Ray. It's a Rai to Rai legacy, Ram Mohan Rai to Satyajit Ray. And what happened in that era? As you know, all these big names, Ram Mohan Rai, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Keshav Sen, Ram Krishna Dev, all the big authors, Rabindranath Thakur, Aurobindo Ghosh, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Madhusudan Datta, and all these big scientists, Jagadish Chandra Basu, Meghnad Saha, Satyendranath Basu, all these big educationists and other people, they were like luminaries, and they could assemble themselves in a small time period. And Professor Suniti Kumar Chatterjee would argue that practically nowhere in history excepting 4th century BC Greece and Elizabethan England, such a kind of thing took place. But have you ever noticed that these people, undoubtedly, they played predominant role in shaping modernity in a feudal country? No doubt about that. They might have their limitations, but they created a kind of modernity. But you would see there was very few women. Practically, the feminine scenario is absent. Obviously, you can name some people, there are exceptions, Toru Datto or Ma Sharadamani or Begum Rokeya. They're insignificant personalities as far as 19th century awakening. A few years earlier, we were in the habit of calling it a Bengal Renaissance, following Sushobhan Sarkar. But nowadays, we know it was not a Renaissance, a kind of enlightenment, a kind of awakening, largely, primarily dominated by the males. The women were debarred practically participating into it. I would request you not to name Sarala Devi Chaudhurani or Begum Rokeya. Consider this city where Begum Rokeya lived. It has not a single lane named after her. And nobody practically knows what is her contribution in promoting female literacy among Muslim women. Here, every name is named after some MLAs, some obscure councillors, and other people. But the KMC has managed to forget Begum Rokeya. He is so insignificant, so marginal an existence. And so far as other women are concerned, they also face the same future, barring a few who belong to the political arena. Now, coming back to that, when Rabindranath Tagore wrote this story, the original narrative, in 1902, it was named as Nosto Neel, the broken nest or the broken home. And when in 1964, Satyajit Ray decided to make a film out of it, he named it Charulata. Please note the significant departure. In Rabindranath's case, it is Nosto Neel, broken nest, and in Satyajit Ray, it is Charulata. His theme is totally different. Not that people did not notice it. Professor Ashok Rudra, a famous professor of economics in the Vishwabharati, did object to this kind of adaptation. He openly ridiculed Satyajit Ray that it is a kind of benevolence on the part of Ray to name Rabindranath as the writer of the story. It is so independent that Satyajit could use his own name as author of the story. And Satyajit was so much angry that he wrote an very agitated essay which was named Charulata Prasange, contextualizing Charulata, where he defended his cause. His defense notwithstanding, we are here to understand the meaning of Charulata. We understand there are three characters, one Bhupati, and the other Amol, and the third one Charulata. We can easily read Bhupati. He is an English-knowing gentleman, an early Anglophile among the intelligentsia, of which Franz Fanon referred to in his now famous thesis on colonialism, Wretched of the Earth, who thought in terms of English, who used to dream in English, actually compared us. When Macaulay said, we must at present form a class Indian only in blood and color, but English in moral, in taste, in intellect. He did mean these classes dominated by Bhupatis and people like us, who usually finds it convenient to go behind English language in order to prove that they are educated and elites to their vastly uneducated and illiterate countrymen. They find this is a privilege, a language privilege, from which a kind of us and them is being created. It's also true for patriarchy. Usually, the male used to talk in English during that period. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote that when we were in Katalpara, near Noyati, his ancestral residence, we used to see male start talking in Sanskrit and females, including domestic helps and our mothers, used to speak in Bangla. When we came to Kolkata, we looked at a difference. The male usually used English as their mode of communication, and it remains the same for the female. They use Bangla. So Bangla, so vernacular, is a kind of inferior thing. Bangla belongs to the female, and this is that in Charulata, where you find Bhupati can use just English. He publishes in a newspaper called Sentinel, where he believes in must-headed rights, truth survives. And then comes the question of Amol. Who is Amol? Amol is like the second generation of intellectuals who were taught in English, who were rationalized in English, but who opted to express in Bangla. Like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay himself, he was taught in English and Sanskrit, but he decided to introduce a foreign form of writing, novel, in Bangla. And in 1861, Durgesh Nandini was published. In any case, let's come to the point of Charulata. We understand Bhupati and Amol, but Rabindranath, for best reasons known to him, kept Charulata under a veil. How did he define Charulata? ধনীগৃহে চারুলতার কোনো কর্ম ছিল না, অলপরিণামহীন ফুলের ন্যায় একান্ত অনাবশ্যকতার মধ্যে পরিস্ফুট হইয়া উঠাই তাহার চেষ্টাশূন্য দীর্ঘ দিনরাত্রির একমাত্র কাজ ছিল। চারুলতার কোনো কর্ম ছিল না। The first line and the third line are explicit enough. In a wealthy household, Charulata had nothing to do. We understand that. And the third line, Charulata had nothing to do, is a repetition of the first line. It only proves, it only emphasizes her worklessness. Now, the second line is not only ambiguous, it is very difficult to translate, very difficult to understand, and I don't know how to translate it. Faloporinamhin fulen, it's an idiotic translation. It's going to be an idiotic translation. Like a flower which would bear no fruit, out of complete non-essentiality, Charulata had to pass long day and night. একান্ত অনাবশ্যকতার মধ্যে তার দীর্ঘ দিন রাত্রি, এটসেট্রা এটসেট্রা। এই শুধু দীর্ঘ, only not long day and night, attemptless. ধনীগৃহে চারুলতার কোনো কর্ম ছিল না, ফলপরিণামহীন ফুলের ন্যায় একান্ত অনাবশ্যকতার মধ্যে তাহার চেষ্টা শূন্য দীর্ঘ দিনরাত্রি, ইত্যাদি ইত্যাদি। So this is a kind of literary usage which is very difficult to formulate in terms of visuals. But it's a key word. It's like code. Unless you have the password, unless you have the code, you cannot open the computer. And Rabindranath gave some key clue to the reader that it is in literary language. What Satyajit Ray could do in order to explain Charulata, he could avoid this sentence. But then again, it could make this story ridiculous. You could suggest that, oh, okay, sir, he could read out from the passage like you. But this Bangla is not usually understood by the commoners who go to visit movie houses. So this is not a plan, practicable. And then he could use subtitles. Same thing, in a vastly literate country, you use words, symbolic things to explain certain situations that is more ridiculous. So Satyajit Ray had to create a 7.5 minute sequence, in fact 7 minutes and 45 seconds sequence, to make you feel who is Charulata. Who is Charulata? Charulata is a thinking being. Charulata is a thinking being. This is most important. In 19th century, thinking did not constitute a job, particularly for the females. There is a sequence, there is a dialogue there. You are doing nothing, ma'am. So then Charulata uttered, Bhabji, I'm thinking, is it not a work? That a woman can think beyond the daily chores of family maintenance was unthinkable. And it is all now well appreciated that the so-called 19th century awakening practically failed. When you look at these mega serials and this serial politics in the streets of Calcutta, you understand that it is very difficult to understand, to imagine that we had a kind of 19th century in August 10th, 2022. It is very difficult that we had also characters like Ram Mohan Rai, Rabindranath Tagore, and Manik Bandyopadhyay. It is very difficult to make the students feel, the youngsters feel that we had people like Jagadish Chandra Basu and P.C. Rai. Though they would listen to you and they would think that this is all part of a great novel. Not true. It's a grand narrative, old saga. The man is suffering from nostalgia. All bullshits. Okay. But then you understand that the whole story of 19th century enlightenment practically debarred women from participating in the development process. Look at Gora, written by Rabindranath Tagore in 1908. Look at Ghare Baire, written by the same author in 1916. You would see that the women questions have largely been neglected, and the historical process, the engine of history, was driven primarily by the male, and this is a kind of paradox which excluded the subalterns. Practically, this is an awakening comprising the Brahmins, the Kayasthos, and the Vaidyas, the upper caste Hindus. Usually, the subalterns never participated in it. Usually, the minority never participated in it. And regardless of the position, whether they belong to the upper caste or to the subalterns, the women, very few of them were given a chance to participate in it. Even in Tagore family, which is the hallmark of 19th century enlightenment. If you enter the premises of 5 and 6 Darpanath Tagore Lane, go to the kitchen and go to the Atur Ghar, the nursing room, you'd really feel that these people, under the leadership of the first industrialist Darpanath Tagore, people like Devendranath Thakur, people like Satyendranath Thakur, Jyotirnath Thakur, Rabindranath Thakur. And in the number 5, though the house has been destroyed, where Gaganendranath Thakur and Abhindranath Thakur, the Hindu part of the family, lived. The kitchens, the toilets, and the nursing rooms were so badly kept, badly maintained, that it was only natural that the children would die early. You have a huge mortality rate so far as the infants were concerned, and the same thing took place in Tagore family too. There had no consciousness. People didn't think about that. And it is the credit of Satyajit Ray that he, in 1964, brought this forward. Practically, Charulata, the first protagonist who rebelled and who proved that it is also a fact, a truth, that women can also think, women can also write. And writing is not a kind of cultural space which should be occupied by the males only. When she asks her husband, "Have you read Swarnalata by Taraknath?" Bhupati says, "I don't need Swarnalata because I have Charulata." This sentence very deep in meaning, because this kind of possession that I have Charulata, I have my wife, like I have money in bank, I have investment in some organization. Wife was a kind of investment who could hold me child, who could look after the domestic affairs and other things. It was Charulata who first came out of the periphery, began to write, began to think, and began to question Bhupati. Not only in terms of a love affair, it's secondary. She was lonely, it was secondary. It was an individual tragedy. That when we deal with the collective, when we deal with a session, people with so many scholars in Lady Brabourne College, we will underline the collectivity. And while looking at the collectivity, we see that Charulata prefers to write about her own village, Amar Gram. First, she thought what she would write. She was not an English-knowing person, so she would not be able to write on salt tax or any reform the way her husband writes in the Sentinel. When she thought about her brother-in-law Amol, she discovered that Amol writes in a language which is so superfluous, elegant, and dignified that it belongs to a kind of otherness. So she decided to come interior. This is the first kind of interiority that was invented by Charulata. And we must remain indebted to Satyajit Ray that he, among us, was the first person to point out the shortcomings of 19th century enlightenment, the limitations. Mind it, it's no mean achievement. Satyajit Ray was not like us. He belonged to the great tradition of 19th century. His grandfather was Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhary. His father was Sukumar Rai. His aunties were Leela Majumdar, Sukholata Rao, and Punralata Chakraborty. One of his grandfathers initiated Bengali cricket in Mymensingh, Sharda Ranjan Rai. He bore the mark of 19th century enlightenment in his veins. And despite this, he could cross the Rubicon. He could bring analytical element into the myth of our awakening. And he could prove that this Nijjhare Swapnabhango and this epiphany we often speak about is a kind of myth. It excluded the women. And if you look at Charulata, you would find the tragic situation. And why did he emphasize so much vernacular in his narrative? Have you ever thought of? If you go through, I'm speaking in simple terms in order to avoid jargons because you know all that. You are all teachers. If you look at, say, everybody read that book, Edward Said's Orientalism. Look at the fact that the foreign term, the European decided to keep it for the elites, for the intelligentsia. They would use it in legislation, in court and judiciary, in universities and colleges, in administration, because the colonies were led to believe that in these affairs, the colonizers were far superior. But when it came to cultural nuances, the natives also believed that they should have a reserved domain. And they spoke in the vernaculars because it was beyond the periphery of the foreigners. When in Gora, you saw Panu Babu crossing swords with Gora about vernacular. When they were considering these issues like man-woman relationship, these issues like religious liberalism, etc., etc., they decided to keep it in vernacular only because in that case, the English administration, the British administration would not be able to penetrate into this, and relatively speaking, the Indians would feel a kind of freedom in discussing those. Outside, you feel colonialized, but inside there is an aspiration for the interior. And Charulata represented that kind of interiority in our film. She is a construct, but she is a construction of the rebellion. The rebellion which we first saw in Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Durgesh Nandini, when in midnight, Osman asked Aisha, "What are you doing here? You are a royal lady." And then Aisha says, "This prisoner is a lord of my life." She acted like Portia in Merchant and Venice, the first independent woman. And before her, only Michael Madhusudan Datta in 1862 wrote Birangana Kabbo, where he openly proclaimed, "Potni bhave ar tumi bhebo na amare." Don't consider me as a wife anymore. But Radhikar Beri Bhango Imamo Minoti. My only prayer is that you just break with my shackle. When he wrote Dashrather Proti Patra, letter to Dashrath by Koikeyi, he was the first person in this whole continent called Asia to say that just because I have become aged, just because I lost my physical charm, I don't want to go into details, but that because that may embarrass you. Just as because I have lost my physical charm, you have lost your promise. Women live on physical charms. It is physics which gives them values. Otherwise, we are valueless. First, it was uttered by Michael Madhusudan Datta in 1862, and the same thing was repeated in Indian cinema in the 1860s But Charulata is not the beginning. What was the kind of representation here? Say, arbitrarily I'm saying, go back to 1936, when we were still under the shackles of British imperialism. In 1936, the Bombay Talkies, a very important production studio in Bombay, they made Achyut Khanna, the untouchable, apparently under the spell of Gandhian notion. It was made by Himanshu Rai. Don't confuse Rai as a Marathi. He was very much a Bengali. He was Rai, R-A-Y. But he used to spell it as R-A-I, Rai. He was a student of Shantiniketan. And Devika Rani, cousin of Pramota Chaudhary. Devika Rani acted as the untouchable in her. But if you look at her, she was a kind of model of Hollywood actors with well-polished eyebrows, with fair skin and elegant look. Nowhere she was like an untouchable. She only spoke the script. That was it. Because it went with the national aspirations. But if you come to post-independent India, where I'm referring these films, like go to consider 1960, a very important year for Indian cinema, particularly for Bangla cinema. The year began with the release of Devi, made by Satyajit Ray in February 1960. Then very soon, after 1.5 months, came Meghe Dhaka Tara. Devi means the goddess. Meghe Dhaka Tara means it's a star-capped cloud, a direct coinage from Shakespeare. And then came ICSSR-ERC in July, made by Mrinal Sen, 22nd 7, representing to most of us the date of death of Rabindranath Tagore, but the story never spoke of Rabindranath's death. And then the year ended with Ganga, made by Rajan Tarodkar. All these films are women-centric. But if you consider the first two, I can go into the later part also, that in that case, most of you have not seen ICSSR-ERC, Ganga, etc. So let us remain confined with Devi and Meghe Dhaka Tara. Meghe Dhaka Tara is an extremely popular film everywhere in India, and Devi is a film which is often discussed while dealing with feminine issues. Apparently, you can say that it's a case against superstition. It is sheer superstition that makes a woman mad, and she embraces death, not willingly, that because of social pressure, because of feudal patriarchal forces. But this is a simplistic explanation. No doubt about that. Rabindranath Tagore found this story, and he gave it to Prof. Mukhopadhyay, who wrote this story, and Satyajit Ray took the responsibility of adaptation in 1960, and he presented Devi. The protagonists were Soumitra Chattopadhyay and Sharmila Thakur. Now, what happened to Devi? As I've told you, that, and you know also, that one fine night, the father-in-law discovered that his daughter-in-law is the goddess incarnate, and he began to treat her as the embodiment of a goddess, and he forced his relatives and household members to worship her, as a result of which Devi, the small little girl, Daya, underwent a kind of neurosis and she had to die. No way out. She died. But look at Satyajit's treatment. After, say, we are 62 years, it was made 62 years ago. If you look at the modernist treatment, when women's studies, so-called academic formation of women's studies was not there, look at a simple situation when Daya is giving a kind of healing touch to her Shoshur Mashai, father-in-law. She is rubbing oil against gout and other things in the legs of her Shoshur. The father-in-law quite affectionately asking, do my son writes later from Kolkata, do you regularly communicate, etc., etc. And Daya was so shy because of a 19th century in the predicament that she answered, she nodded, but did not speak a word. In that night only, Kalikinkar Chaudhary, the Jamindar, the father-in-law, saw in a dream that Devi Trinayan, the goddess with 3 eyes, melted into Daya's face. Why? Why that night? Typically that night. He could see the dream in other nights also. No harm done. Before and after. But why on that night only? Because as a modern being, Satyajit Ray wanted to make us feel that it was a kind of sexual gratification for Kalikinkar Chaudhary that her daughter-in-law, when she rubbed the lower part of the leg, it must have given the Jamindar, Kalikinkar, a kind of erotic pleasure, which is forbidden. Not only because it is incestuous, but it is forbidden pleasure. And if you want to get rid of a kind sense of guilt which arose because of this forbidden pleasure, you will have to make a kind of displacement according to Freudian notion of trance. That is why you are unconscious, forced to construct the little Daya into kind of great mother, because only by that kind of transformation only you can get rid of the incestuous guilt, not permitted in any society of the world. And ultimately what happened? Because of sexual repressions and other things, Daya went away. We did not see her dying, that we concluded that she had died. It's a fateful coincidence that Hrithik Ghatak made a film similar in nature. Practically, it was a parallel kind of making. 2 studios parallelly existing. Actually, the censor date was also very same. They independently made the film, but they were quite aware that they were taking such attempts. In Megida Katra, what do you see? Apparently, it's a story of a refugee family, but if you go in between the lines, you see that Nita Chakraborty, MA second year dropout, sacrificed everything for her family. Her father broke his legs, and that is why
So we cannot hear you. The video has also paused. Dear participants, Professor Mukhopadhyay just informed that he is having a little problem with his internet. He'll soon rejoin. So please bear with us.
Now, you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry, we can hear you. It was an internet debacle. I can't help it. So, I regret. Anyway, we were telling that usually the Bengali film critics and film scholars wanted to depict Nita's location as a partition failure story, as a story which grew out of the trauma of partition. But I would suggest that you carefully look at the construction of Nita. Nita is a character which is strong and bold. And from the very beginning, if you scan the images, you would feel that her boyfriend, Shonu, is a bit scared of her, not because of her characteristic strength and strong personality. It is also a kind of sexual fear. Perhaps when Professor Laura Malvik clearly explained it using Freudian notions that the site of the body, feminine woman body, is both a kind of represents a kind of pleasure and threat. It's like a tourist lodge where you want to take your position. You are allured to look at it. At the same time, it offers you a kind of castration anxiety and you feel scared. If you look at the low angle camera position of Shonot and Nita, you would feel that woman has already become a threat for the lower middle class predicament in a refugee colony. Why she is a threat? Because she is courageous enough to represent a kind of ideology. It's the ideological premises that made all the difference. When Nita picks up because of family maintenance, she practically crosses a feudal barrier. In the feudalism allow you to earn, but notice it that you do not become independent. You can buy your sarees and choose the color of your residential premises. Those small things, they don't bother. But you cannot take the driving seat. That is a fundamental condition. And Nita crossed the barrier for which she had to be punished by patriarchy. What is the punishment? Have you ever thought that Nita could die of any disease because she did not get proper food, she deprived herself of proper nourishment, etc., etc. She could die of any disease. But Ritik chose a disease called tubercular infection and tubercular lung infection. Why did that kind of disease? Because tuberculosis, among other things, destroys your body charm slowly. At one point of the film, Nita also says herself that I look like a crow. Who noticed me? She's conscious. And Ritik Ghatok gradually makes such an arrangement as to prove that she is banished inside her family. She lives lonely in a room and washes her utensils on herself. She is separated. She decides to get separated from everyone inside the family. And then the TB is discovered and she is sent to a Shillong nursing home and then result, and there she dies. The Bengalis are very fond of the last dialogue, Dada Ami Baste Chai, which is the wrong one. Nita never said Dada Ami Baste Chai or Dada, I'd like to go on. She said, Dada Ami Baste Chai Chila. Dada, I also wanted to survive. And she screamed. Thereafter, Ritik Ghatok violently pants over the landscape, and we conclude, as taking into consideration the circumstantial evidences, that Nita had died. But I would suggest that carefully try to remember this scenario. When the elder brother in the last sequence went to visit his sister, he was cautioned many a time by the nurse that she is not sick now, but don't try to excite her. It might relapse. The Dada, the elder brother, did just the opposite. He went there. He reminded when she asked how are you? Look at it. The Dada never asked the sister that how are you? But the sister asked, how are you? And then he was given the answer that everything is fine. The house has become a two-storied building. Her younger sister Gita is now a very naughty child. The father's leg is all right now. All happy pictures, feel good factors. And then Gita screams, Dada ami bakte cheyechilam. Actually, it's a kind of return of the depressed, according if you use Freudian terms. Because Gita sacrificed everything in a belief that it would make her into a goddess, which is a false notion of life. The patriarchy injected this kind of false notion into her. And when she got an infection, a tubercular infection, it was actually, symbolically speaking, the punishment given by the patriarchy to the lady. Because, you know, in a world dominated by male, in a patriarchal world, what is the ultimate punishment to a woman? Not death, but the gradual desexualization of your body. Just think for a couple of seconds that you are gradually becoming desexualized, and TB is a kind of disease which directly tells upon your body foundation. Everything. You become sick, you become pale, and I'm not going into the other details of your physical charm, so-called physical charm, quote unquote, which is so lucrative for the male people. You will become irrelevant in a society. Then you are banished. And when you are in, she was reading a letter, the only love letter that she received from her boyfriend, who is now the husband of her younger sister. She believes that she had a wrong choice, but she also was in the habit of believing that here was a moment, a small moment, but a very precious one, where she was recognized by the society. Tumi mege dhaka tara. You are a cloud-capped star, nobody recognizes you, but still you are a mege dhaka tara. And this, I quote Freud, this addressless daydreaming was her sole objective of existence in the sanatorium. Now when Anil Chatterjee, the Dada, the elder brother comes and makes it open that they are all happy in Kolkata, they are all successful, this daydreaming becomes a first with her. So it becomes an urgent necessity that she be affected by female hysteria. If you go through Freud's early essays, and if you go through the medical films of 1940s Hollywood, you would find this as a predominant symptom of films which involves melodrama. In fact, Meghe Katara is a film which can offer you a classical text why a woman screams, why a woman undergoes a kind of physical and psychological catastrophe. These are things that should be studied in modern terms in our discourses as far as these feminine studies are concerned. I will also say about star system. Why Shruti Sen became so prominent in post-independent India? Because you see, after 1947, after the era when we entered a political democratic setup, we became truly citizens of a country where we were able to cast our vote. The industrial scenario began to appear in the horizon. The steel plants began to roll, and we saw that the administration and the cultural milieu decided to foreground a capitalist scenario. Although they, in political rhetoric, say it's a non-capitalist path of development, I quote Nehru, still it was making inroad into a new era where we needed newer kind of female protagonists, not seen in the practical field, but in the fictional representation. It was a demand to create something. And God created woman. Roger Vadim said. And God created, quote unquote, Shrutita Sen. Who is Shrutita Sen ultimately? We were forced to believe that Shrutita is an eternal charm, a very beautiful woman, but that is a kind of male fantasy. Anybody is beautiful, everybody is beautiful. It depends on how you look at her, depending on her cultural position, gender position, and other things. I'm not going into analyzing this lucidly ambiguous adjective beautiful. But what actually Shrutita Sen proposed to us, to our eyes, she incarnated a new elite. She proposes and imposes a new ethics of individuality. Because in feudalism, you seldom found a kind of individual woman. Of course, you found, before Shrutita Sen, in Indian cinema, persons like Devika Rani, persons like Kanan Devi, and other heroines, Suraya. But as an individual, you could never place her. Remember, if you go through the Shrutita Sen films, right from Shari Chuattor and other things, Shari Chuattor, Sap Mochon, Harano Sur and others, you would find that here is a woman who has apparently no origin. Always we saw Chobi Bishas, Pahari Sannal, Kamal Mitro, people like them, as their father. Strange things that they usually are oblivious of their daughter's presence. They do not take a record what their daughters are doing or will do. They only come in the forefront when Uttam Kumar appears to make them aware of his intention to take away the girl. Then they become angry or other things or advisors and others. It's a strange kind of individuality, a mythical individuality, which you know is not possible outside the film auditorium, but which was possible inside the auditorium, and therefore millions and millions of post-independent women, ladies, girls, they decided to opt for Shrutita's cause. We often see her angry, a kind of unreasoned person, like Brigitte Bardot in post-war France. In fact, Shrutita and Brigitte Bardot had some similarities. Both of them refused to grow old. Although it is because of the Western Hemisphere, Brigitte Bardot is sexually more articulate, and in our climate would not permit to Shrutita to do like that. She only came in physical proximity with Uttam Kumar in 1960 with the film সপ্তপদ, এই পথ যদি না শেষ হয়, if this road never ends. Beautiful song sung by Sanjoy Mukhopadhyay. But if you look at Shruti Sen, she represents a kind of post-independent desire. She is not actually a character, but embodiment of a desire created by popular cinema. If you look at Supriya Chaudhary, who is she? Supriya is not important as an actor. If you look at the physicality, the physical attributes of a woman, so much sought for, you would see that Supriya remains outside the periphery of average Bangla woman as far as physical and bodily presence is concerned. Ritik Ghatak used her beautifully in Komal Gandhar, excellently, using her as a sexual threat in Komal Gandhar 1961 and in Megheda Katara 1960. That besides Ritik Ghatak, whenever she appeared in Shoboshati, alongside Uttam Kumar, in Amropali, everywhere, she represents a kind of dual attraction for average Bengali viewer. She is a sexual object of desire, and she is also a threat, castration anxiety. If you say arbitrarily, we can pick up other heroines also. Look at Madhuri Dixit. Suddenly we go to Madhuri because Madhuri is a post-liberalization product. I deliberately coin the word product. Though she's a human being, she's a product. How she has been made into a product by the Bollywood film industry? Because, you see, after liberalization, we thought that the women should be represented in a way as to become players both inside and outside. We had no characters like Madhuri Dixit. Look at the now famous film Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, Who Am I to You? It was made in 1994 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister. Here, Madhuri Dixit appeared as Nisha. And who is Nisha? Nisha can play snooker, and Nisha also can make halwas. She can please both the interior and the exterior, an impossible project. You would become a nuclear physicist and a good luchi maker, both at the same time. You would make mehendis and you would solve impossible tensor calculus problems. You are endowed with divine possibilities. You are a non-human being, a mythical being, because you are a woman. In real life, we victimize you. That is why in projected life, we make you a deity. Because of this economic liberalization, Madhuri is a bit arrogant, but look at this fact that she serves a call center, but never decides to stay within a night resort. She learns computer, but obeys her family demand and decides to marry her elder sister's brother-in-law. You consider the following three films. Dil To Pagal Hai, 1997. What Madhuri had to do in that film? she spends actually full time of the day in window shopping. The character for which she is enlisted practically spends a 5-star living standard in Netherlands. We see extremely exquisite bedrooms, curtains, and the huge splendor of wealth. India is promised that you will be given such kind of life if you opt for liberalization instead of the barren socialist past. Madhuri is seen with a cotton candy. She wears a band, and in earphone she listens to Hariprasad Chaurasia, a brand figure for modern existence. She dances, but it's a kind of narcissistic dance. She actually looks at herself. And never it has been said that in order to have such a life, you need to earn something. It is promised. A kind of false consciousness as uttered by Louis Althusser. In fact, if you want to read Hindi films and Bombay films, you need to carefully read the nuances of ideology, a coinage basically discovered a joint endeavor of Gramsci and Althusser, Louis Althusser. And usually we avoid that. I have attended some seminars. I'm not a scholar on these things. I know I am wasting your time. But when I go there, very seldom I notice that someone is discussing the undercurrents of ideology. They never discuss interpellation. And that is why we think that this representational order are how much they are truthful to the reality. We never consider that this reality and the representations both are hallucinations. It's a promised land which never existed. Who solves our problem? In Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, it's a small dog which received apparently the kindness of Lord Sri Krishna, and in Dil To Pagal Hai, it's a pistol Ganesh. Madhuri, neither Madhuri nor Suchitra Sen nor any other star, Shanmya Thakur and others, they question the power balance of the society. They remain very much with the patriarchal periphery, but takes the hallucinatory position as if they question the arrogance of patriarchy while they never question it. Only in films like Megedakatara and Charulata, we have seen them questioning, regardless of their success. In Megedakatara, she failed miserably, and in Charulata, she raised the questions, but did not find the answer. It was historically impossible. It was a situation, Sartian concept, that answer was not the ultimate desire, that we must remain indebted to them, that they could raise question. Remember the situation when Marilyn Monroe became a star. Why did she become a star? Why the American industry and empire decided to make Marilyn a star? Because of her nude images, because of her Venice-like structures of breasts and thighs. No, dear lady, not at all. Why then? from 1953, she began to become a star. Why? We should ask like Hamlet, let me not burst into ignorance, but tell why. Because, you see, when Kinsey Report was first published in 1943, the patriarchy was not disturbed, because we came to know that our sexual behavioral patterns, by our we mean the male sexual behavioral patterns, have some certain characteristics. We are not disturbed. Okay, let it be. But when in 1953, the second volume of Kinsey Report came into being and it was publicized, it was read in medical colleges and psychological and in academia, where they used to read psychology and other things, it became apparent that scientifically proved that the women desire as far as sexual things are concerned is different from the male. The male got scared. You would see, along with the economic imbalance, along with the Kinsey submission, there came a very popular marriage. We used to see it in our early years when we were around 20 years. And we were all naughty then. It was Playboy. Playboy was first introduced in 1953, famous for his one nude picture. Beautiful, fantastic nude frame. And they carried 3 complete nude frames of Marilyn Monroe. These 3 things, economic instability, Kinsey Report on female sexual behavior, and arrival of Playboy in the American scenario, these 3 things made Marilyn Monroe possible. Why? The simple answer is Marilyn Monroe assures you that, well, sex may be difficult, that with me it's like chocolate. It's actually a dialogue spoken by Marilyn Monroe. And everywhere, 7 years each or any other thing, you'd see Monroe behaving like a true actor, but being misused as a sex doll. And she assures you that she is there to console you during your sexual failure. She acts as a compensation. And these things should be read in proper terms while dealing with the politics of representation in cinema. The same thing with Elizabeth Taylor. Look at her Cleopatra image. The American army and the American civilization was at its zenith. They began the Vietnam operation. They were quite sure that they will come out flying colors from South Asia. And it was a disaster. So the Richard Burton Cleopatra story underwent a kind of severe accident. And 4 years after, when you see who is the afraid of Virginia Woolf, you see that this same Elizabeth Taylor had been made into fatty, alcoholic, some kind of nightmarish look. Because she is a threat now. 4 years earlier, she was the prime attraction of Hollywood. The language, I began with Richard Burton's tribute to his fiancée. There's the same hallmark. Everywhere there is politics. Representation in itself is politics. And for the women actors in cinema, body is still the destiny. You feel a kind of binomial attraction as a sexual object of desire and as a sexual object of threat. You suffer from a kind of attraction and an anxiety. They are blended together so unmatchingly that you feel trapped, and at times you feel liberated. When you look at Madhuri in the 90s, or Amisha Patel in the 2000 year itself in Kon Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, you feel you are liberated, while you are more trapped as an object, as an image. I think I can go on, but somebody was, one of my colleagues was questioning. We can start, we can have a brief question answer session. I don't know whether I'm competent enough to answer you. I am not sure whether these words carry any significance to you. It's your final day to it in this session. Anyway, if you want to enter into a dialogue with me, I'll be acknowledged.
Thank you so much, sir, for that brilliant, for that very, very thought-provoking talk of yours. We do have some questions. This is Shuparna Bhattacharya. She's saying, Sanjoy da, it has been another enlightening experience. Just wanted to know whether Suchitra Sen or Supriya Chaudhury's choices were important or the scripts representative of emergent times.
Both at the same time, but you know, there are situations when murders become comical. We wanted them to use as toys, but they became certain weapons. In 50s, when Uttam Kumar, Suchitra Sen came as an accomplice of Uttam Kumar, we thought that she would be an ideal replacement of the family lady Kanan Devi. But she became apparently an independent lady, represented some desire of post-independent India, that ultimately we saw her playing in the hands of patriarchy and industrial magnates. That's a tragedy, but it's a success that she also could raise some questions on the new aspirations and desires of a liberated democratic country. And the same thing with Supriya. Supriya apparently is not that quote-unquote attractive the way Suchitra Sen is. I know it's a politically incorrect statement, but I am deliberately taking recourse to this kind of incorrectness, that Supriya Chaudhury is a bit rough, a bit coarse, and a bit vulgarly physical at some points. The producer decided to use her body parts like that. But she became more successful as a lower middle class representation of femininity in on screen. It is a kind of author acting. I understand your question that the producers, you wanted to ask me that, do you really think that these producers are so intelligent as to make proper homework to look at Suchitra, Supriya, Aparna, or Sharmila Thakur in their places? No, they were not. But these actors, because of their, what I should say, genius of the system, could represent, could bear such messages, we can decode after 50 years or so. If you look at Marilyn Monroe, if you look at Brigitte Bardot in France, Marilyn Monroe in USA, and if you compare their Oriental counterpart, Suchitra Sen or Nargis or Waida Rahman or Sharmila Thakur, you would feel these things. That God did not create these women. I rephrase Roger Vadim. Are you happy?
Suparna Bhattacharya, if you could respond, please.
ঠিক আছে সুবর্ণা
Thank you, Sanjoy. As I said, it's always been so enlightening. And I was really thinking, as you said, the producers, whether they ever gave it a thought or not. But thank you, thank you for your response.
Thank you, Suparna. You are benevolent enough to appreciate me. I don't deserve your compliment. Anybody else?
Anyone else among the participants? Sir, can I ask you one question? This is Purna here.
Please.
Yes, actually, you talked of Charulata, how Rabindranath presents her in Noshtonir and how Satyajit Ray has portrayed her in Charulata. What would you say about another figure, that is Mrinal, in Strir Potro? And I think the film was made by Pundendu Putri.
Right.
So, would you kind of throw some light on Mrinal's character there?
You know, Strir Potro was written after 1976. When Devendranath Tagore died, Rabindranath was permitted to take a more liberal position as far as depiction of women is concerned. It's altogether a different issue. If you go through Rabindranath's activities before and after 1906, you would feel a complete reversal. Practically, a change scenery, all change utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Strir Potro is more a transparent and explicit rebellion. It was there in the original text, and Pundendu Putri, while depicting this story, followed practically Satyajit Ray's Charulata pattern, shot by shot, and it became a kind of manifesto for the domestic women. We can say the home is what the heart is, and when the home is broken, where the heart can go, that can be explained by using Strir Potro. But as far as film revolution and film language is concerned, a more adventurous case was 1964 Charulata. That much I can say.
Thank you, sir. Any other question, participants? They're all thanking you for your brilliant presentation.
I let them speak out.
Fascinating presentation, brilliant presentation. That is how they are writing in the chat box. So,
Really do things really that. In that case, I would request our participants to kindly take up 3 films for their academics researches. It is not because of the fact that I am a blind follower of Jean-Luc Godard. I myself translated 3 of his scripts in Bangla. One is called Piero Lo Fou, 1965. One is made in 1965. One is called Mascula Femina, made in 1966, when I was myself a student of Jadavpur University. And the third one is 2 or 3 things that I know about her. Why I am telling these? Because it's a brilliant trilogy made in the 1960s Paris to show how urbanization and increasing Americanization was disturbing the fabric of European society life. How the independent woman was facing the problem of phantasmagoria, of affluenza, a newly coined term. And I think somewhere I wrote in Anandabhayar Patrika or Pratidin, I don't know. I am not sure at this moment. The papers are not with me. It was published yesterday. So I wrote that at this moment of time, Kolkata, Mumbai, Chennai, Bengaluru and other places are undergoing a kind of metamorphosis, a new desire, a new kind of affluenza, a new kind of edit is coming into picture. They are apparently pointless. They do not know where to go and where to land. It's a unipolar world, a kind of world which appearsly gives you a false promise of independence that traps you everywhere from behind. If you carefully, you can read it also in English and other languages. Everywhere you would find it in French, in English, in Bangla. I am not canvassing for my Bangla script, but you can find it everywhere. And you can see this film. It's an ideal text for feminine position in society. These three films, Pierre-le-Fou, Mascula Femina, and Mascula Femina you can easily understand. The film is masculine feminine, Nari Purush. They deal with the children of Marx and Coca-Cola, the students with which they are concerned, the young generation. Fantastic treatment of the second sex in post-Victorian world. I would suggest that if you see these three films, in fact, Satyajit tried to great pains to explain Mascula Femina. To him, it was a classic film. I am not saying that since Satyajit since Mascula Femina was favorite with Satyajit, you see that. No, I am not saying that. You see the film in accordance with provision of your intellectual demand. What I'm saying?
I think she got unmuted. She was saying something else. Yes, sir, please carry on.
It was a family dialogue. Anyway, it happens. A kind of interruption. I was saying that if you look at this film, you will see how the women is positioned in this situation of affluenza, even in Europe. And after globalization, since the barrier is open, India is also facing the same challenge, at least in the metropolitan cities. So we can have a relook at these films, say Marilyn Monroe, positioning Marilyn Monroe in a changing world, in a post-war scenario, locating Godard, Sweden, particularly Anna Karina in these films, and we can read it. Try to read it. Say Ritik Ghatak in Subarnarekha and Meghedaka Tara, Satyajit Ray in Devi, Charulata, and Mahanagar. Mahanagar is another piece, very important. And in Pratidwandi too, say in 1970, when the women are coming out, when a lady, Siddhartha's sister, openly tried to appease her boss and openly tries to give a kind of signal, quote unquote, to her boss. Was it ethical or not? Was it a question of survival in a society suffering from turmoil and degradation? Satyajit himself raised these questions in these three films, Pratidwandi, Simabadho, and Janaaranya. The Adversary, The Company Limited, and I think Janaaranya is, I don't know, I'm not conversant with the English name. If you look at them, these three characters, Siddhartha's sister, I forgot her name, Simabadho, Soumya Thakur, and in Janaaranya, you find that girl who decided to opt as a body seller. You can look at these characters, how they were formed, why they were formed, what kind of society made them possible. We are yet to discuss all these issues. Usually we avoid these issues while discussing Satyajita, Riti Ghatok, and other things. In Ekdin Pratidin, the girl failed to return. And the society was more concerned with why she failed to return. It created scandal, gossiping, and other things. Anybody can miss any train, any bus, or any cab and fail to return to her household. But the tremendous gossiping around her, it is because of the fact that she is a woman. Why she would not appear in time? The society is still asking, since you are all women, you are duty bound to appear the way I expect you to appear. Man has a look, while women are duty bound to appear. There lies the basic difference. We can look at a thing, but you suffer more from to be looked atness. You are a spectacle, object of desire. To be looked atness is a phrase coined by Professor Laura Mulvey. Why? You would remain passive and the men will remain active, even in cinematic information. That is a question to be investigated and answered. Thank you for the time being. Hope we can meet again.
Thank you, sir. There's just a couple of more questions. Dr. Shushmita Brahmo wants to say, or rather she wants to ask that you mentioned masculine femina, Pero Lefu, and the third one. Please mention the name again.
2 or 3 things that I know about her. This is the boy. A self-publicity, my translation. Look how clever I am. I can canvas for my own.
Okay. And Kolapi Shen, she is saying that Jono Arondo is perhaps the middleman. That is what she's saying.
Yes. He's right. He's right. The middleman.
If you have any more questions, participants, you may please go ahead and ask.
But did you like this session really? I think it's a wastage of time on your part. Since Porna requested me so many times, so I did, but I'm not sure.
Sir, we have a question here. I'm actually at my college and I have one of my colleagues who wants to ask you a question over here. Amrita, could you please?
Thank you, Pornadi. Sir, fellow disciple of yours, Amrita here.
How are you?
I'm fine, sir. So my question to you, actually, I was just overwhelmed by your lecture since my first day with you during my course in film appreciation. There you taught us 400 blows by Truffaut, okay? And the final scene where that boy was just standing in front of the sea, it is as if a metaphor between past and present and looking at future after a complete wretched life. That's how you taught us, and you portrayed him in a very different way. And can you suggest any, or can you refer any female characters prevalent in Indian cinema where there is that sort of sense of eternity or sense of endlessness is being portrayed through the character? I have not seen that sort of movie. Yes, there are some certain movies which are, imposing certain de-stereotypes to roles of women, but I have never ever seen a single movie where the woman is trying to, pacify herself or find her own destination in such a different manner. Can you refer in any sort of movies where that sort of representation of women is there in Indian films? Thank you, sir.
I'm afraid till now we are yet to have one. We usually offer more therapeutic messages for women in film, but rarely we find an independent woman making her own way and giving us a true notion of freedom in truth or in fiction. I can refer to Megheta Katara, who is herself a space which constitutes a kind of female Prometheus in Indian cinema. She knew her limit, she knew her destiny, but despite this, she went ahead only to make us aware that how to boldly face a kind of martyrdom. I can refer to Megheta Katara, but Megheta Katara is apparently a defeat. It's like using Beethoven's Fifth Symphony during a disaster, but till it remains Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Meanwhile, sir, we have some more questions. Nobonita Mitro, she says that Mrinal Sen and Rajen Torofkar had strong feminist streaks in them too. So could you please elaborate?
In fact, I must thank Nobonita. I did not take into consideration Mrinal Sen and Rajen Torofkar. I didn't name Rajen Torofkar. Only once I named that in 1960 he made Ganga. But if you see Antorikhe, Akash Chua, Palonku and other things like Rajen Torofkar, and if you look, carefully scan Mrinal Sen from the days of Baishes Travel, you feel for them, truth appeared in a different way. Say Baishes Travel. Baishes Travel is important to the Bengalis because of Rabindranath's departure. But Mrinal Sen took a complete different position. In his film, there is no reference to Rabindranath's passing away. Instead, he chose a familial position where Madhavi and Ganesh formed excellent family connection. They were couples to look at. Only because of famine, how economic disaster and external forces can directly invade our relationship, and when it makes the invasion, it becomes more brutal to the woman. That was shown in Baishes Travan. Baishes Travan is a very important film because both Satyajit Ray and Hrithik Ghato, they used traditional modes to compensate the modern disaster. Hrithik used the Great Mother image from Kumar Sambhavam alongside the Azad girl, and Satyajit used the huge spectrum of 19th century awakening to locate Charulata. But it is a notable thing with Mrinal that he never imposed any larger than life historical context to locate this poverty-stricken family and how they move to a kind of disaster in 1943, approaching 1943 famine. And time and again, Mrinal Sen located his female characters in a different way. I can give you a small example. When we were students, we were so much influenced by his interview, a film made in 1971. And we were mainly in the habit of using it as a political manifesto. But we never noticed that Mrinal Sen used Karuna Bandyopadhyay, who was actually Sarbojoya in Pather Pachari, in a situation where she is making preparations for food and using an old kind of furnace, পুরনো উনুন যেখানে কয়লা দিয়ে ধোয়া দেওয়া হয়, এই কয়লার ধুলো যে these smokes which comes out of the furnace and affects the eye, how many eyes are affected? He again asked us in Chal Chitra, a film which he made in 1970s, that how many furnaces the domestic atmosphere hold in a city like Calcutta. In fact, it is everywhere inside this film, right from Neel Akasher Niche, when the Chinese hawker used to look at a poster where an exquisite lady was shown. This exquisiteness in contrast with the mundane situation of a city. In Baishe Travan, the hunger and the woman, and you look at this position, the male is still in the remains still in the privileged position. In the Calcutta trilogy interview, Kolkata Ekattor, and Padati, you find the same thing, that the women are being interrogated again and again, and Minal is trying to change his focus from the principal male characters to the female characters. What happened to them? It was Minal's fundamental argument. And then came Ekdin Pratidin. Even in Mahaprithvi, in my opinion, his last important film. In Naxal, a Naxalite student leader committed suicide. The Berlin Wall fell. That what it means inside a mosquito curtain, what it means to a woman who bore the child, who saw everything from interior. She never participated in making barricades on Kolkata street. She never participated in a Vietnam procession. That now she is seeing the collapse of everything, and she is the worst sufferer. This suffering, I must pay tribute to Mrinal Sen, was only noticed in Indian cinema by Mrinal Sen. Others were more interested in general description of the social turmoils, while Mrinal Sen took it as a special tutorial to write a few lines for the suffering humanity comprising women. That we must admit. And Rajen Tarafdar, while making films on the river Ganges or making other films, used Sandharai in such a manner that she represents rural women and how they are formed. When in Ganga, we found Niranjan Rai as a violent, virile, fully masculine being. We saw Sandharai as his counterpart, who could depict the finer sensibilities of life. In fact, she holds the structure of the film. That is up to the film studies people, but the balance of life is maintained by the females, has been time and again put to test by Rajen Tarafdar, and he could prove us that females from inside supply the necessary balancing factor. That much I can say.
Thank you, sir. We have one last question. This is from Kolapi Shen. She just wants to know, could you please repeat the name of the critic who used the phrase "to be looked at-ness"?
Laura Mulvey, Professor Laura Mulvey, Oxford University, L-A-U-R-A, Laura Mulvey, M-U-L-V-E-Y. And I would suggest that Kolapi should read these two fundamental essays. In fact, it's a prime text. If you ask me what to read about your session, I would say that Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema by Laura Mulvey. You would find it in the net, no problem. And when Mulvey was criticized for his early Freudian notions, she wrote an afterthought. You couple these both and you read it, you'll be immensely benefited. That I can assure. Professor Mulvey came to our university, we had elaborate discussion and she's an internationally known scholar on feminist look in cinema. You should read. It's like Bible or Gita, visual pleasure and narrative cinema.
Well, so sir has answered your question, Kolapi. Thank you so much, sir, for that
Thank you.
very, very interesting lecture. And we hope to have you again, not online, but offline here at Lady Brabourne College.
Thank you very much for being so generous and kind to me.
No, sir, it was a pleasure and absolute honor to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So should I leave now?
Yes, sir, you may.
You advise me to leave now. Okay. Thank you.
You may, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, dear participants.
If anybody of you want to contact me on some academic issues, you are free to contact me. My phone number and my email ID are with Orna. Okay.
Sir, just
Lady
to
Brabourne colleague.
sir, please.
Yes, Suparna Bhattacharya, you wanted to say something?
No. I was asking for the phone number. What you were saying?
Oh,
Yes.
that she will. I can give you, but
I'll share it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm leaving with your permission.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here with us.